All right. Good morning, everyone. Friday Live, 8:30. Here we are again. Welcome to the Bailey and French Friday Lives. You're joined by me, Anthony, and today's awesome guest. It's great to see you again, Richard. We've done a couple of these. It's great to see you again. I'll get you to introduce yourself in a minute, but for those of you who are joining new, this is just a time where we reflect on the week. We reflect on some of the key topics that are coming up for our clients and what's come up for us and what we're thinking about in the world of psychology and business and kind of those hot topics that are coming to us, and all in the aim and mission of humanizing the way that we work and the future of work. So thanks, Richard, for joining. Really great for you to be here.
Yeah, morning, Ants. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I enjoy these conversations. So I'll say a little bit about who I am briefly. I'll keep it brief so we can get into the good stuff. But yeah, Richard, business psychologist or organizational psychologist, that kind of thing, doing leadership, organizational transformation, a bit of change, organizational design, all these types of things. So all about people in the workplace. How do we make it better? How do we make people reach more of their potential? How do we make them thrive? That's where my interest lies.
Yeah, awesome. And it's great to have you with us. And your point today was around autonomy. And what we're going to be talking about today is around the importance and relevance of autonomy in a hybrid world, but also maybe not in a hybrid world, actually, just generally the importance of autonomy. It's a hot topic that has been around for a while. This isn't new. This is coming from kind of the self-determination theory, and Dan Pink made it famous with his book. And if you haven't read it, it's one of my favorites, Drive. You know, what's the impact of autonomy on motivation, engagement, productivity more broadly? But I guess interestingly is kind of how can businesses tap into this right now as a source of energy for their workplace and improve well-being as a result, but also improve performance. And what are we doing? What are leaders doing? What are teams doing? What are organizations doing to create an environment where autonomy is possible? And I'm really pleased, by the way, that our dress sense today is matched. Maybe our thinking on the subject will be as well.
Yeah, autonomy doesn't mean that you're not aligned. We didn't align pre.
There we go. First learning of the day. I love it. So what are you thinking, Richard? Why did you suggest this topic? Because I think it's a great one.
Well, it was top of mind this week. Actually, there's some people sort of grappling with it on the individual level, and a little bit on the team level of being given autonomy, and people saying, yeah, okay, I'm an autonomous team, and then still saying things like, I'm not sure if my line manager will thinks that should be, what I'm doing, or that's not necessarily what my line manager thinks I should be doing in this autonomous team. It's like, well, hang on a minute, there's a tension here, paradoxical. Like you can't always have the best of both here. Like rely on your line manager and expect to be autonomous, because that's, they're opposing ideas to a certain degree. And then the other side is people that have done it really well and saying, I've grown these small autonomous teams and it's getting lots of traction. People are enjoying it. People are getting lots of work done and feeling better about it. And then the senior leadership are taking notice, like, this actually works. Like people, if you give them autonomy, they do stuff, which goes against what some of the old traditional thoughts were. If you don't watch them, they don't do anything. But that's what's been coming up for me this week.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast on the way in which talked about something quite similar, which was kind of, as you said, teams being given the freedom is actually quite a new thing. It fits the new world of work. It fits the more kind of cognitive work that we do in kind of traditional workplaces. And I'm conscious that I'm not talking broadly about all workplaces here. I'm talking about maybe office-based roles where creativity, teams, matrix, organizations in particular. But it being a very fine balance between autonomy and the traditional kind of making sure that you're accountable for roles. And that balance between autonomy and accountability can be quite a tough one for leaders at the moment.
Yeah, that is yeah, that's one of the things you mentioned that really triggered. Oh yeah, that was one of the things. Like, oh, we want you to be autonomous, but the risk is that you don't have accountability. That feels like it's going to be very much everybody does whatever they want. Um, but it's not chaos. It's not anarchy. But I mean, it could be. But then it's finding that though there's probably an agreement there. Like, how do we make sure that you're accountable to yourself, the team, the organization, the business results, or whatever it is in the scenario? And I think that's the conversation that probably hasn't been happening. You're going to get all of this autonomy to do it how you want to do. We still need to achieve this, and find a way to make those come together. And that's tough, because that needs real. First, the leader needs to know what they want, and the person needs to believe that that's the right thing to do, and then they take it from there. So it's not. I don't think it's an overnight trick.
Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, you're right. It's not going to be an overnight trick. I guess a question on a lot of people's minds might be, well, what do we actually mean then by autonomy? Because like you said, there's probably a scale of autonomy. There's kind of complete chaos and anarchy on one end, which in some aspects can actually be quite helpful. You know, if you're trying to get out the box thinking, you know, build a kind of metaverse like Facebook is trying to do, it's probably quite good to try and break the rules and break current ways of thinking. Whereas on the other end of the scale, you can have autonomy, but maybe it's down to compliance, and you can't be so autonomous and have those kind of outward ideas. So you are feeding into boundaries. So I guess there's a kind of scale there. But what are we talking about when we talk about autonomy?
How would I define that quickly? I'd say with people having not, I don't want to say control, maybe agency over the work that they're doing. So they're not being controlled and told everything how they should do it, what they should do, when they should do it, but not in this completely off the grid style with some boundaries or some guardrails or something. So here's some agreed objectives or outcomes. And then you're free to make sure you achieve them, or you work towards them, avoiding ABC, any kind of things that compliance wise you have to do this or you can't do this. Of course, kind of build those in. So I suppose that maybe that's like supported autonomy. It's so you've got a structured autonomy where it's not just I give this to you and I'm gone, and then it's on your shoulders. It's more you get this, but I as the leader or as a manager could still be there, but I'm not going to get in your way. I'm going to get out of the way, but be there with enough support and guidance if you come and ask for it. And I think it's those changing the dynamic a little bit. So this autonomy is that freedom to act within a agreed environment, depending on the context, or an agreed space. Let's call it a space.
Yeah, it's kind of those parameters, or
yes.
But I guess that the important thing there would be to communicate those parameters quite early on and catch them when they're not happening. I guess it's like anything, right? You're setting any sort of boundary. It's communicating them and then coming back on them when maybe you feel like those boundaries aren't being adhered to, and that's not anyone's fault. This is just part of the communication process.
Yeah, and I think it is that conversation. And it's in that conversation probably you start developing the autonomy muscle in the other person, because just giving autonomy is a paradox in itself, because autonomy is probably something you have to take. So it be like put onto the table, and then the people have to feel comfortable enough to pick it up and take it. So there's that gap in the middle of, hey, I want you to be autonomous. But okay, tell me more. Am I going to take it, or am I going to shy away from it because of all the accountability and the responsibility that comes with it? So that conversation has to be really clear. and it probably has to be, I don't want to say like formally agreed, but I think it has to be kind of, it would be nice to have it put down in a mail or a document, say like, this is what we think it's going to look like. It might be wrong, because if it's new, we don't know. And what another thing you said is that this is when you talked about when you're trying to be creative and break the rules, it could be, yeah, we put this boundary in place, it turns out that's not very good, we need to expand it rather than restrict it, so that it could go both ways. And that, so I think regular check-ins are, how is this autonomous working? Not a weekly one-on-one, but more of a, how is this way of working or not, or for you, the team, this department, or whichever level we're talking about. So that makes it fun, but it has to be, I don't know, iterative, it has to evolve, has to be co-created. And that's really hard, because that takes time, and people think, oh no, just do it, it'll be quicker. I don't think it will. If you spend more time at the beginning, hopefully you'll answer a lot of those questions that might just pop up, and then you can avoid firefighting by actually being very deliberate about it all.
Yeah, and I suppose you're right. It's very deliberate. It's very conscious. It's very proactive. And a lot of the things that we're hearing at the moment when we're talking about well-being and burnout is actually the things that contribute to those the most is around poor communication, poor connection and collaboration, or silo behavior. And I guess what we're talking about here with autonomy is actually letting people figure that environment out for themselves becomes critical in this world of work, where actually a lot of it is new. You know, not many people have worked hybrid before, or maybe things are just feeling a little bit different right now. There are definitely new teams. There's definitely new people joining and leaving, and actually creating the environment where people have the autonomy to figure this stuff out for themselves, and to have those open conversations about, how are we working? What's that looking like? Is that all right for you? Keep checking back in. Going slow is actually enabling you to work smoother and faster long term. And I guess that's kind of the relevance of what we're talking about right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I love that, going slow. Is smooth is fast. You know, I like saying, because it is true. You can run, you can sprint, and then you realize you've gone the wrong direction, and you have to sprint the other way, and then it's tiring, it's burnout. It's yeah, it is challenging, especially in the hybrid, well, from fully virtual to, well, I suppose we weren't doing this very well when it was all face to face. So if we go fully virtual and remote, and then going hybrid, then we've got catching up to do. But it is, at least the conversation is happening, happening more. So, but I think it's the same conversation. It's just, how are we going to do this in a hybrid way? How are we going to do this in a totally remote way? And the answers will be different. But I think it's having the same questions and going back to that. We maybe we've been working really well for the last 3 months, but now we're changing the context, changing how we actually show up physically to do the work. Do we still do the same meetings when we're all in the same, we're all actually sitting next to each other? I mean, the answer could be, yeah, absolutely, just do that as a default. But if everything goes by default, then you know, on autopilot, there might be something you're missing, and just because it's easier and faster.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess this is what people are talking about, and the importance of coming back to the office. Because those check-ins don't have to be so formal. They don't have to be, right, we've been working together for 3 months, therefore we have to have this structured conversation that looks exactly like this at this time on a Monday morning, because that's when we scheduled the meeting 3 months ago. All of those things might not be relevant right now. And I guess making sure, if we are working remote, or we are working kind of not face-to-face or in the office, making sure those kind of conversations still happen, because these are the types of environments that it's creating.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think I like still what someone I collaborate with. He always says, choose your own adventure, and it's usually within these set guardrails. But but you have to have to choose, and it's there today. I'm focusing on the choose part of things, and it's actually an interesting habit to get people to do at work. People choose all the time, like, what do you want to? What coffee do you want? To what are you going to have for lunch? To where am I going to live? What am I going to wear? We make a billion choices every single day, and then you get to work and the number drops, even though you're probably doing quite cognitive work, really, knowledge work. So you think that people's kind of mindset from years of experience would be, let's have decisions made for me, and I just do. I do, you decide, and so it actually, there's a lot of kind of preconceived ideas that when people go into the world of work, that boss is boss and work is work, and it's breaking that down as well, and so that's why it takes a bit of time, and the recent year and a half or so has kind of helped break it down, because nothing was the same. But when you start moving back slowly, like, do we just revert? And that's a kind of a question mark. And some people are saying yes, let's just go back to how it was, and some people are saying no, we like this. I don't think it's about where. I think it's really about how they've been working. And it's been enforced, but it's not about. It doesn't matter if you're in your room or the butterfly room, or you're in the meeting room in your office or whatever. It's about how is that being set up. It could be terrible anywhere if it's set up wrong.
That environment and that place is very important. You mentioned revert and reverting back to kind of not old ways, but ways that you've probably found were successful before. Like, that's why you're doing it again. The behavior's probably at some point been reinforced, and you found it was successful, and therefore you're reverting back to something that you think will work again in the future. You probably aren't, unless you're not aware of it as a behavior. The chances are you're doing it consciously because you think it's going to have a positive impact on your relationship or the team or performance or what have you. Unless, of course, you're not aware of it, as I said. But how do we stop ourselves from reverting? How do we consciously apply those new behaviors, I suppose, would be a question. How do we help our leaders do that?
I think and this is the $1 million question, I guess. But sorry, got an alarm going. There we go. Sorry about that. There's a tendency, which I think we really need to be aware of here, is that we've got how do the leaders do this, and the leaders that. Well, hang on, let's. This might not be a popular opinion, but how about we treat the leaders like people first and figure out what's going on with them, because there might be a whole load of insecurities or doubts, or just the same thing everybody else has been dealing with, and they've been supposed to be like steering the ship, or whatever analogy metaphor you want to use. If we just, I think, but then it's a case of like, let's stop, have a moment, like ask a question yourself. And question yourself sounds really negative, but just ask yourself the question: is this still fit for purpose? And literally from yourself, like, all the, as I said, one-on-ones, the Monday morning meeting that you mentioned, or I suppose a nicer way to do it is, from what we've learned over the last 18 months can we continue to do, and how can we do that if we go back to the office? Can we do that if we go back to the office? So I think it's again that stopping to then to go, rather than just say, right, revert back because that's what we know. We might not know that anymore, and we must have learned something. We must have learned something. So reflection, I would say, and pausing and questioning, curiosity about what is there that can be used from the old way, the previous way, and what can be modified. And it doesn't have to be revolution, just tweaks, changes. You won't, if you did a really terrible job in 2-3 years ago, the last 18 months you probably have disappeared. So unless you've got one of those very lucky companies that just thrive because of whatever you do, I think so. There must have been something good there. To your point, there must have been something happening that was good. It doesn't mean it was perfect. So I think it's just having that kind of humility to question. So, we were good. Results were good. We can be better.
Yeah, totally. And even as you're talking, my brain's going, okay, so the check in my mind when I go into those conversations, the check that leaders generally can do when they go into those conversations, and actually everyone in a team has certain responsibility for this, right, for creating this environment. But the check is, are my predetermined assumptions, my previous experiences, are they still fit for purpose? Just ask that question. Let yourself do that reflection and that kind of thought. It doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion with self, does it? It kind of, this is happening over time, right? And then maybe there's something for me about, and this is why we say creating psychological safety and a growth mindset within a team is so important, because it can be quite difficult, can't it, to go and actually ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think I've got some kind of predetermined thoughts based on previous experiences. Is this right? Am I getting this right in this context right now? What do you think? And that might be to your team or to a peer or to someone who might be able to just give you a slightly different perspective on the lens that you're looking through. I think it's really, really important to go out and seek that feedback. It's interesting.
I love that question because it models a couple of things. It models trust in the person, also a bit of that vulnerability of, I'm not sure, and I believe that the answer is there. I've got this idea, but I want more input. And that's a great way to tackle probably most things. I have this idea. It might be based on assumptions that I can't quite see myself. To get someone to reflect back or answer the question kind of directly. And I suppose the first time you ask somebody, especially if you're in a leadership position, if they're your direct report, it might take a bit of time to hey, is he really asking for the answer or just asking for theatre? And it's the repetition of that. So, and that's that then comes down to relationships. How much time have you spent on the cultivation of relationships with people so they can feel comfortable saying whatever they need to say in response to what you've asked? And that's, as you pointed out, psychological safety is the key. And it's that's not an overnight job. So I think a lot of it comes right back to, do people feel that they can do what they believe is the right thing to do? Can they say what they believe is the right thing to say without fear of repercussions and all of those things? And if the answer is no, then no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what you ask, you're not going to get the whole truth.
Yeah. There's an alternative scenario. You're right. You're right, and I'm going to play devil's advocate because I love it. What happens if actually you have been in that scenario before? You do know what's going to be best, and you know that pretty certain. You're pretty convinced on that because you've maybe seen it. I'm thinking of we've been talking about this before. If people go and watch back some of the other Humanising Work live series with Rich and I, we talked about this. And senior leadership in particular are in those senior positions because they've been successful before. Sometimes they are also looking at other things that the team isn't looking at because their job is to be looking future focused, right? Beyond kind of the immediacy and the media problems. They're kind of going, yes, it might make it more difficult for you now, but actually in the future, things are going to be better. And this is the way we need to do it. And you're a bit of pain right now, but that's okay. And we'll help you and we'll support you through that. But I guess there's a point here when we're talking about the Great Resignation, and we're talking about people feeling listened to and valued and respected. That's a very fine balance, between going, look, I do know this. This is why I'm in this position. Trust me. And how do you get that balance as a senior leader to make those tough decisions that the team is actually going to potentially see as a stifling of autonomy and a stifling of creativity and a stifling of their unique strengths? and could potentially therefore leave, because that's why, you know, a lot of the reasons that people are leaving at the moment is for, you know, not feeling recognized or valued, or so how are senior leaders battling that balance at the moment?
I think you modeled it quite well with saying, if this is probably, you have to be very clear. I have this decision. Well, this decision is my decision to make. This is the decision I want to make. I will listen to what people say, but there's no guarantee that, like, I will listen, take note of it, to your reactions, your responses, your questions. The decision might not change, but you can respond back to all of the things like, oh, yes, you're worried about the increased workload now because we're changing to X, Y, Z, but in 6 months' time, from my experience, it will be easier. Or in 12 months' time, or the business, if we can't continue with this, we can see the business dropping off, and you know, there'll be no job for you to do. So I think it's a bit of candor, a bit of transparency, a bit of spending the time to listen. All very difficult things to do, especially when you bring in the worst C word of all, compliance. You know, there's some things you can't say. You can't say because you're not allowed. But then you have to. Then there's the fine line between what can you say, what can't you say, how do you say it. But I suppose giving people that voice, even if it won't necessarily change anything, just like, I am listening, and I have a response, not an excuse, but a response. Or the response can just be, I don't know the answer to that. And I think it's a little bit of that, and that is quite scary to not know the answer when half of you is telling that this is the answer, this is the decision I've made. I don't have an answer to all of the questions, because we don't live in the world where all the answers are available now in front of us.
Yeah, you've I guess role model vulnerability there. You've been authentic. You've not said, you know, I know where I'm going, and that, you know, just listen to me. You're making people feel heard and listened to. And I suppose this is why we're talking about, and when people ask the question, why humanizing the world of work? Why is that? I guess that's exactly why. Because if you don't have that human connection together, if Richard doesn't buy into Anthony's credibility and vision, and he doesn't trust that I'm actually doing this not just for my profit and my pocket, but I'm doing this because of the good of Richard and Richard's team, you know, and our team and us together. If you don't have that foundational connection and that trust in each other, that's going to be a very difficult thing to put on people, isn't it? Those the decisions are going to be slow, and you might actually end up making the wrong decision because you're just trying to kind of please everyone. But then the alternative is you're making a decision that pisses everyone off and everyone leaves, you know, and you're treading that very fine balance. And if you don't have that human connection together, you will never find that balance ever.
No. Yeah, and that absolutely, because having the conversations, modeling vulnerability, and all of that thing works if it's kind of accepted. If it's rejected because, like, hey, what's Anthony doing today? This is different. This is weird. He's behaving strange. Is he okay? Because it's so away from the norm. Then it's months of work to get to that position where it's like, oh no, he cares, he listens, he thinks, he responds, he's, you know, he does. He's not treating us like a robot, he's treating us like a human, and it does matter.
Interesting. Unconscious, there's only 1 minute left, and again, I don't know how that time's flown, but if I'm a leader listening to this, get this an awful lot. Because you've just touched on it again, it's like, how does a leader change their behavior without making it sound like it's theater, and also not doing it all in once, because people go, hang on a minute, this is a totally new person that's walked through the door here. This isn't authenticity. How do you take that first step?
Yeah, that is the question. I think one of the key things is to find somebody else outside of your immediate group. Could be someone internally, could be somebody external, so it could be a friend, just to talk, I'm thinking about doing this, because they might see something you're not seeing, and just model that same thing, but with somebody that knows you really, really well, and say, I think this, I'm going to do this at work. Decide what it is. Decide what you think is the, what are going to be the signals. This is going to show that it's going to work. This is going to show it's not. How many times am I going to commit to before I quit if it's not working? And have real, discipline, maybe, or structured discipline about how you're going to do it, and so you know that you're going to persist, but not persist endlessly if it really isn't working. So choose one thing, I think, as you said, and just kind of make it a design, to do it by design, but also with input from others.
Do it by design. Discipline isn't a dirty word.
No,
I like that. That's a really great place to end, right? And I hope people listening have taken a lot away from everything that you've been saying today. I can't believe half an hour has gone so quickly, but thank you, Richard, for joining. It's always interesting. These conversations are as much me absorbing and learning and trying to piece together everything, right? We're all learning. We're all in progress. We're all kind of learning as we go. And it's really interesting hearing your insights. So thank you for sharing today. Really appreciate it.
Really enjoyed chatting to you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who's joined, and thank you for the comments. I've popped up a couple, but I also got very distracted by the conversation as we went. So I haven't responded to everyone. Apologies. But thank you for joining us. If you're watching the recording, thank you. Have a look at some of the other ones, especially with Richard on the previous ones. But there's lots around autonomy, psychological safety, growth mindset that we touched on before, and we've touched on again today. So make sure you check those out on the YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and join you again next week, next Friday, 8:30. Thanks, Richard. Take care.
Yes, bye-bye.